well, let's get started then. Okay. I want to welcome you all to Charlotte Wildlife Stewards, our speaker series. So we're real excited tonight that you're here. How many of y'all have been to our programs before? Okay. All right. Well, y'all probably heard a lot of this. So we are a chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. There are 21 chapters across the state. So you folks online, if you're not in Charlotte, I would encourage you to go to the North Carolina Wildlife Federation website, to the chapter page, and find one that's near you and get involved. So our mission, well, wait a minute. Why did it not advance? Sorry. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. So our mascot is the barred owl, which we all really like that. There are a lot of them in Charlotte, and we hear them at different times of the year. I have one in my neighborhood I hear about 4:30 in the afternoon. So anyway, our mission is to create, protect, and preserve wildlife habitat through education, enjoyment. And that's one reason we're here tonight, is the education piece, and hopefully it's also enjoyable. Next slide. Oops. It's not advancing. All right. This slide's about the messier your yard is, the healthier your yard is. So it's this time of year that everything's kind of turning brown and looks like it's dying, but it's really serving an ecological purpose. The seeds on your plants are feeding birds. Native bees, the ones that are cavity nesters, will bore into those plant stems. So in the spring, if you want, leave them up all winter. If you want to cut them back in the spring, leave 12 to 18 inches, because they're most likely, they're going to be in that lower part. And then as your plant grows, it's going to cover up those stems. And the next year they won't be needed, and they'll go back to nature. So anyway, so that's a good reason. It also, all that brushy stuff gives cover for insects and birds, and leaving your leaves gives a place for a lot of small animals, mostly invertebrates, to overwinter. Some of them need that cold time, which seems weird, but they need it. It's also a food source for the birds in the winter. You'll see them out there scratching through the leaves. If you're not a member of our chapter or another chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, I really encourage you to join. You can go through the North Carolina Wildlife Federation website and choose Charlotte Wildlife Stewards as your chapter, or if you're in another part of the state, choose that chapter nearby. It's $25 to join, and those proceeds, some of them are kept by NCWF, but the majority of them come back to the chapter, and that allows us to do a lot of the programming and events that we do. So I encourage you to do that. Here's our leadership team. We always welcome anybody that wants to get involved with planning and coordinating and just getting together. We really do have a good time together. So this was at Wild on the Water, which is in June. So I encourage you to reach out to us through our email, charlottewildlifestewards@gmail.com, if you're interested in that. We have some events coming up. This coming Saturday is tree planting with something called Creek Relief. That is a program of the city, and it's to reforest some areas. So this will be along the new part of Long Creek Greenway. You can go to the sign up is on our website if you're interested in that. And also in January, we're going to have a bluebird house building workshop that will be here. Hopefully, if the weather's good, we'll be doing it outside. If the weather's not good, like it wasn't last year, we have an inside place we can do it. So there'll be more information coming on that. But I just wanted to mention that. December is kind of a quiet month because there's too much going on for everybody in December. So we will still meet as a leadership team, but we don't really have any programming in December. We do have, so our 2 programs in the new year, it's weird, isn't it? So Rupert Medford, who's with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, will be talking about coyotes, because we all have them in our neighborhoods, and how can we live with them, because we have to. And then Urban Vultures will be our February program, and this will be with Hannah Partridge, who's getting her PhD studying vultures' nesting habits. So she'll be talking to us about that. So we're excited about that. One other thing I want to mention, we do have t-shirts. So if y'all are interested, they have our circle logo on the back. We have a few samples of this, so you can see the sizes. This one is a small. We have some samples, but there's a QR code back there that you can order them if you're interested. So that will help us out. When the program is over, we will be having a raffle. I don't know if y'all saw that cute little seed raccoon back there, but someone will be the lucky winner of that. So, so Ruby, do you want them to hold questions to the end? Okay. So we will hold questions to the end with Ruby. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ruby. So I have to read this.
Okay.
So actually, I met Ruby, gosh, it's been a few years ago, because it was before the habitat steward training that you did, I think. I can't remember exactly when it was. But anyway, last year in 2022, Ruby did a section in the habitat training class that we had talking about this particular topic, wildlife. And then Morgan is the executive director of Carolina Wildlife Conservation Center, and we're happy to have her with us tonight. We met like 5 years ago at Discovery Place Nature. So anyway, so Ruby, she's been a licensed wildlife rehabilitator for 15 years. She obtained her Bachelor of Science of Wildlife Biology from Lees-McRae College. She is the Wildlife Rehab Director for Carolina Wildlife Conservation Center, where she oversees the center's rehabilitation practices for patients, along with the training and mentoring of staff and volunteers. Before coming to CWCC, she worked with Wildlands Engineering as a wildlife biologist and lead environmental scientist for hydrology, botany, and fauna monitoring of wetland stream restoration projects, which included conducting threatened and endangered species surveys. She has also helped the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission with bat surveys. Her skills specialize in trauma and emergency care, including turtle shell repairs, along with husbandry and habitat experience. She is also the first North Carolina rehabber to obtain the rabies vector species license from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. She will be telling you more about that tonight. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ruby. Oh, wait.
I don't know if I'll necessarily need a microphone. I'm pretty loud, but I'll wear it anyways. For the online people, I forgot that we have an online audience. All right, let's see if I can manage the computer. And I'm not used to being behind a screen, so I'm a very okay. And it won't. That works too. I just don't want to trip over any cords or anything. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having us this afternoon. I'm excited that everybody wanted to learn more about wildlife. And my presentation for you tonight is learning how to coexist with the wildlife, because that's one of the main things that we get calls about. So I want to go into information that will hopefully be helpful for you. You can take away and share with other people for you as well. And of course, helping wildlife. But like she said, I've been a wildlife biologist and a licensed rehabber, and it's not advancing. Let's see here. Uh-oh. Technical difficulty. Okay. All right. So she's already given you my introduction. What button did you hit to advance? What? Oh. Okay, here we go. So here are a couple of things that we're going to chat about tonight. Coexisting with the wildlife, and we have this human conflict that we think we all have when we really don't. How you can be a wildlife advocacy, and we're going to determine whether or not the animals actually need help, and then you're going to learn a little bit about CWCC. So coexisting, as we think that it is how we can share the landscape with the wildlife that already exists and coming up with tools that will help us in helping the animals as well, so we can share the landscape. Because as we know in Charlotte especially, and we get a lot of animals from Charlotte, but while the wildlife is losing habitat in Charlotte and surrounding areas. So we're going to talk about how we can coexist. But first and foremost is that's exactly what we want to do. We want to coexist with the wildlife. We don't want to automatically just kill everything or relocate everything. First of all, it's illegal to do that. So you want to be mindful of that, because you're going to be, the state is the one that says it's illegal, not just that we're saying that, but it is by state law illegal to just to relocate wildlife and to kill them. And we're going to talk about some of the typical challenges that we hear often, either on the telephone, text and everything, and like how we can come up with non-lethal management to be able to coexist and resolve these human conflicts. Now, one of the number one species that we get calls about are beavers. So this is BB. This is when we got her in as a baby, and this is right before she was being released. So we rehabbed her for 2 years, and then she thrived well enough in our habitat that we created, and she ended up having babies, and so we were able to release a family. But beavers, we constantly get calls about beavers. And the number one thing we get calls about beavers are HOA community ponds. And we have beavers that are chewing down the trees. We have beavers that are, clogging up the culvert. So we want to come up with ways to help people learn that they can coexist with these animals and not rely on hiring professional people that will come out and kill them. They will trap them. And if you're in a community area and you've got kids around, the way they kill these animals, they drown them. And it's just not something that you want your kids witnessing, because it is pretty devastating. But not only will it trap the beavers, it can trap raccoons. We've had them trapped and killed. They trap the snapping turtles, get caught in these traps. So there are other options that you can come up with. So wrapping your trees, especially if the beavers are chewing the ponds, the trees that are around the pond, is they're looking for food. They're not wanting to take down the trees just to, irritate you or make you mad, but they're trying to get to the branches and the leafy greens, because that's actually what they're eating. That's what they need as their food source. Then they'll take the strip bark or the strip branches and the trees, the trunks of the trees and everything, and actually build their lodges and dams out of that. So they're not eating the trunks of the trees, but they are eating the bark, and they are eating the branches and the leaves off of those branches. So that's why they're having to cut down those trees, is to get to the actual food that they'll eat. But if people can wrap their trees, that's one way to protect them and preserve them from being chopped down or chewed down rather. There's a device I'm going to show you. It's called the Beaver Deceiver, a pond leveler, and it's an option that communities as a whole can come together and install to protect their ponds and their culverts from being flooded. But one of the easiest ways, if you don't want to do all that, is that you can coat your trees in vegetable oil or mineral oil and cayenne pepper. Now, we don't want to put too much cayenne pepper, because we know that cayenne can actually burn your plants, but it doesn't really do that to the trees, the trunks of the trees. And then another option for you is to paint your trees with sand being infused with the paint. And the beavers don't like to chew that. It irritates them for some reason. So those are different options that you can use instead of trapping the beavers or relocating the beavers, because technically by law, if those professionals come out, the wildlife removal companies, that is, if they trap those beavers, they do kill them. They do not relocate them. So keep that in mind. This is an example of the pond leveler or the beaver deceiver, is that you install this pipe. And again, you can come together as a community and do this versus having someone professionally do it. It would be more costly if someone comes in and does this for you. But if you do it as a community, it's more to build, camaraderie of how we can save the animals, get the kids engaged, help them learn. But installing this pipe here, it allows the water to go through, and the beavers do not realize that they're still losing water, but their pond water level will still stay the same. So it just allows for the culverts also not to be blocked up, because if you got this wire around it, then the beavers can't actually block the culvert itself. So then the roads don't get flooded out. So there's different ways about it. You can Google pond leveler or beaver deceiver. There's lots of YouTube videos out there on how to build this and how to install these. Save yourselves money by not hiring a professional. And again, building that camaraderie and how we can keep our communities, helping the beavers. Because not only that, we talk about the beavers and the importance of it, but they're keystone species. And I know you've heard that often, but they and what they build in habitats allows for so much more wildlife to come and thrive in those areas. Out west, the People have learned to appreciate the value of the beavers because they're helping keeping the groundwater levels up, and they're preventing drought, which, you know, the West experiences a lot, but they also help in fire resistance. So they've got this water, you know, separation where these fires are coming, and they learn that the beavers are actually saving more habitat, not just the ponds that they're building and the wildlife that's thriving, but areas that extend way out past the ponds because of the water that they've been able to preserve. So another animal that we hear about often are groundhogs. You know, I am a huge fan of groundhogs. They're my favorite non-rabies vector species. They're very comical to me, but we get calls often saying we have groundhogs that are digging in our yard and we want them gone. And we do get calls on people like, I'm going to trap this animal, or I have trapped this animal, or they're eating my garden. And I will push this kid down here. He's called Chunk the Groundhog. If you have not YouTube, Chunk the Groundhog is hilarious. But this gardener in particular, his name is Jeff, and he was becoming frustrated with someone or something that was going around and taking chunks out of his garden vegetables. And he was trying to figure out what was going on. So he set up a trail camera, and lo and behold, he finds Chunk the Groundhog that is eating his vegetables. So what Jeff decided to do was also build another garden separate for the groundhog himself. So he was very satisfied with that garden, but to the point that he invited others to come along, and they started setting up shop underneath his shed. And so now he has made actually money off of Chunk the Groundhog and his family with, you know, merchandise and stuff. But he's become a fan of wildlife because he's seeing the possums come, he's seeing the raccoons come, he's seeing the skunks come and take advantage of the food, because again, they've run out of habitat and now they've got this garden that's available to them, and they're taking full advantage of that. So, you know, another option that you can do to prevent the groundhogs from eating your garden is to provide a separate garden for them. If you don't want to do that, you can also use methods to deter them. We highly recommend Repel All. It's an all natural ingredient, and you'll hear me talk about that a couple of times. All natural ingredients, it won't harm your children, it won't harm your pets, but it will deter them in certain odors or fragrances that they don't like, such as cayenne pepper or certain mints, that stuff. We also have people that call us and say, we have this animal on our porch and we don't know what it's doing. And usually during the summers when we see this, and they're heat dumping because they get so hot, they will find concrete, you know, on a shaded area, and they'll just lay out flat, and it's called heat dumping. And you'll see these animals up in the trees as well doing that. They'll be splat out on a branch. The squirrels do it, the raccoons do it, but oftentimes we have people call us and say, hey, we have this animal on our porch, and we just tell them it's heat dumping, it's going to go off. Groundhogs scare very easily, so there's not like they're going to attack you. If you go, you know, after them, they'll take off very quickly. But we just want to let people know that there are options instead of automatically trapping and relocating or trapping and killing these animals. Because again, with trapping, you're going to be traumatizing the animal. Kids are going to be witnessing that. The animals harm themselves in the trap, and you could possibly be also orphaning babies if you're relocating them or killing them. So there are different options that you can provide. One of the things that we like to recommend people, if you're going to build a fence around your garden, and you're going to do the fence that comes out to like an L shape, make that fence wobbly because they can climb, but if it's unstable, then they're more likely not to climb that wall to get over the fence into your garden. Another option is if you want to build a sturdier fence, but take your the top of it to a 45-degree angle out. So if they do climb it, they're going to climb outward away from the garden. They're going to fall. They're not going to climb over it. Other items that we recommend are helium balloons. If you put helium balloons at like waist level, they move when the wind blows, and so it spooks the groundhog, and they'll usually run away. If you have old CDs around your house that you don't know what to do with, if you hang them on strings and hang them through your garden, the iridescence, the shimmery of it kind of spooks the groundhogs as well. So different options so that you can deter the groundhog from going into your garden or digging in your certain areas of your yard. Again, I mentioned the Repel All and motion sprinklers. Some people have gotten their lights on motion, but you can also put your sprinklers on motion. And once the animal of whatever kind it is trips that off, then it'll take a sprinkler head and start spraying them, and they don't like that, and they take off running. So these are different options that we can coexist with the groundhog versus trapping and killing them. And they really are funny animals to watch. Now, this is one of the #1 calls that we get all the time. Is I've got raccoons in my attic. I hear babies. There's something up in my attic, I don't know what it is. But what we try to tell people, because we get these calls too often, is that they've relocated a mom several weeks ago or several days ago, and now they hear crying babies. They've got animals that are dying up in their attic, and there's a foul odor now, but that's because they have relocated mom. So the thing about relocating any animal, especially raccoons, the state's against that, because if you're moving a raccoon to a territory that they're unfamiliar with, they are territorial, those existing populations are going to attack and kill that new introduced mama raccoon, and more than likely she will not fare well. So we definitely discourage people from doing that. There are humane ways that you can evict these animals from your chimneys or from your roofs. Loud noises, we'd like to irritate them with that because they're looking for a quiet, secluded place, right? But if you make it very uncomfortable for them, she will relocate those babies. She has multiple dens out there, and she would definitely take them to other places if you give her the time. And that's the thing, you got to give her time. But if you just haul these, moms off and orphaning their babies, that's just being cruel. And we want to learn how to coexist. So once we have mom and the babies out, because she will take them to a different den, we want to replace the area that she's gaining access. Other things that we get calls about raccoons is they're in their garbage, or they're in their commercial dumpsters. We get those calls often in the summertime. That you want to make sure that you're closing your garbage lids, securing them with either bungee cords. With those big dumpsters, you want to make sure that the doors are closed. There's the top lids, and then there's the side doors, making sure that those are kept closed. But if you do find that someone's in there and you're a little reluctant to help them, you can put something down, like a ladder or a branch or a board, for something for them to climb out and leave. If they've been in those hot dumpsters, for several days or even just a day in the summer, the hot summers we had, we want to make sure that they have good hydration before we just cut them loose. So giving them a way to get out and providing them water bowls around there so they can rehydrate would be very helpful for them. And then, of course, we always hear about raccoons getting in people's chicken coops. So if we're having to keep animals from escaping our enclosures, we know that people can keep animals from getting into their chicken coops. And that's where the owners got to be more responsible in making sure their chicken coops are more secure. Of course, we want our free-ranging chickens, right? But during the day, the raccoons are not going to usually bother them. It's at night when the chickens have not been put up in a timely fashion, or they're secure, the coops themselves are not secure enough to keep the animals out. So there's different options that you can do to help do that. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit about securing our coops. Another thing I want to emphasize about seeing raccoons out during the day, or other species as well, your skunks and your foxes, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're rabid. These moms are nursing around the clock, and if you've been a mom, you're having to feed a baby, it takes a lot of nutrition. So she's going to go out and she's going to find food while these kids are sleeping, right? She's got to have that break to be able to go feed them, or to go find food so she can feed them. She's got to keep her energy and her nutrition up. We would only intervene during the day if this animal is appearing sick or injured. We know it's been hit by a car or it's not stable on its feet. Evidence that we know that this animal is needing to come into care. But the guidance on that, if you call in Texas, we'll walk you through, we'll ask for pictures and so forth. But just because you see one of these animals out during the day, especially during the winter right now, they're going to take advantage. Not that it's cold today, but when it gets back down in the 30s or so forth, the animals will come out during the day to forage for food while it's warmer temps versus at night. So just keep that in mind as well. But during the summer, these moms are taking advantage of the baby sleeping, and they're out trying to find food during the day. Bats. We also get lots of calls about bats. And the thing that we want to emphasize is that bats do not chew holes into your housing. They find an entry, because it doesn't take much space for them to be able to gain access to your attic or even into your chimney. But there are certain times of the year that you can evict them from your house, and there's certain times that you cannot. By law in North Carolina and most other states, it's May 1st through August 31st. You cannot evict bats from your dwelling, and that's because it's pup season. And as we all know, or should know, our bat populations are declining due to the white nose syndrome, habitat loss. So we want to make sure that we can save as many as possible. So the state says, by the end of August 31st, most of the moms have had their babies, and the babies have learned to fly and they can get out. So we, instruct people. We can provide them a website that has this information, but how to build an exit-only door. So you can take where the hole is, you can see and you can tape a piece of plastic up or a piece of window screen over this. You're not going to tack it down on the bottom portion here. You want to leave that loose so that the bats can come out and fly out, but they can't come back in because they're not going to be able to lift this up to get back into that access there. So the next thing you would need to do is, after you know all the bats are out, you'll go up and inspect, make sure everybody's out, is to fix this flashing or, here we've got, this is a caulking gun. The caulk that's got the pipe in it, is that you cut off the end and you can put either a pantyhose there or some sort of mesh that will allow them to come out as well and then fly out, but not fly back in. So these are different options that we provide to people on how they can evict bats humanely without, hiring a professional that will come in. There are some wildlife removal companies, I'll be honest with you, that are not ethically or morally doing this like they should. We had a couple calls this summer where they're coming out during pup season, and they had video of these guys just chucking bats out, and they were mostly babies. And by the time people started helping them, they were already dead. So we did report that to the Wildlife Commission because that is against the law and they can be fined and they can lose their license for being able to do that. So just keep that in mind at that season. You see someone doing that, call and report it. Let us know and we can report it to the state, but I'll provide you with a telephone number for a hotline violation by the state that you can call and report it yourselves. If bats get into your house, they come through your vent or something, don't go around swinging a broom and try and knocking it down because that's only going to injure the bat. And then it is going to have to come into care. But if the bat should land on something like a pillow or whatever it may land on, carry that item outside wearing gloves, lay a towel over it, take it outside, and more than likely it's just going to fly right off. But to try to knock it down with something, you're actually going to cause more harm than good. And then you'll have to bring the bat into care so it can be rehabbed. But we always want to emphasize to people to wear gloves when you're dealing with bats because they can bite. And to be mindful that, they're more scared of you than you are of them probably. Now, some people would probably disagree with that, but our bats are our friends and we need them because they're going to take care of the insects that you don't want, right? All right, so people call us and say we found a grounded bat. And sometimes you can find grounded bats for multiple reasons. Your juveniles, they're learning how to get their wings and learn how to fly. They may be grounded for that reason. They could be grounded because of a storm, if especially it's a tree bat. This is a hoary bat. But your tree bats can be blown out of the trees during storms. Your predator birds like blue jays and crows like to attack them. So that may be a reason why they're grounded. And we had multiple calls this year for grounded moms that were struggling giving birth. So a lot of times you'll find bats on the ground and you don't know exactly what's wrong with them, but it's a female that's having difficulty giving birth. And now this time of the year, you can find your tree bats, such as your red bats, your hoary bats, on the ground hibernating because they actually do not migrate, but they hibernate on the ground under your leaves. So now this time of year, we're getting people that are out blowing their leaves around. They're discovering that they find a bat and they don't know what's wrong. Usually it's okay, but sometimes these blowers can cause them to be injured. But if you do find a bat this time of season, it must come into care because once it's woken up from hibernation or the torpor stage, they use that fat reserve and then they're going to have to be rehabbed until it's the spring and there's food readily available for them. So there's multiple reasons why bats could be grounded, but just keep those things in mind. Bats do not do well taking directly flight from ground. They can, but they don't do the best. So in the spring and summer, we recommend that if there's no injuries or obvious reasons that need to come into care, place them up on a tree so they can take off more easily. But the bats, we definitely want to make sure we're taking care of them because they are definitely taking care of our environments and ecosystems. I'm going fast. I want to make sure I get to everybody's questions at the end. Gray squirrels, flying squirrels are also animals that people find in their attics and chimneys. And like we talked about earlier and how we can discourage them to get out of there are the bright lights, the loud noises, the ammonia rags. Please don't use mothballs. The carcinogens are not good for anybody, so we don't recommend that. We also have people that, well, let me emphasize this as well, is that these moms are great moms also, just like with the raccoons, but these squirrels will look for their babies. And they do have other dens and drays that they can take those babies to, but give her time to get them out of the attic. or the chimney, for whatever that is. And if they're in your chimney, you're going to need to put a cap on that after you get them evicted. But just be mindful that she will come looking for her babies. Just give her the time. We have people saying, "Oh, the squirrels are eating my bird seed at my bird feeder." Well, so is everybody else. The deer and the possums and the skunks. But they're just trying to take advantage of the free food. They don't know it's for birds only. They don't read. So we just try to be mindful of that. Now, I do have a friend that she loves her flying squirrels, and she puts up bird feeders, and it's for the squirrels, the gray squirrels during the day, but it's primarily for her flying squirrels at night. So she's definitely, not minding them being around at all. But if you have squirrels that you don't want at your bird feeder, there's ways to deter them. You can buy these fancy squirrel feeders, or bird feeders now, excuse me, that can keep squirrels out. Some people say you can take your bird feeders in at night to keep the flying squirrels out. But in all honesty, there's nothing, worse than saying you can't eat it, but you can, right? So I feel that same way about the beavers as well. But please don't trap them and relocate them or even kill them, because when you're doing that, you're actually orphaning these cute little babies. And the moms are the best moms. They're a lot better than we are. Even though we do a really good job at rehabbing, these moms are the best moms for these animals. All right, skunks. Now, I don't know if y'all know this about me, but I love skunks. Nothing makes me happier than seeing a skunk. I think they're absolutely adorable. But we do get calls all the time about them digging in their yards. Like, I've got these holes all in my yards, and that's because the skunks love to eat grubs, and they love to eat yellow jackets, especially yellow jacket nests. They will actually dig down to the very bottom and get that entire nest. And I've had this happen in my yard, especially a couple of times, and I have no problem with that. They want to dig a hole in my yard and dig up the yellow jackets, more power to them. But that's what they're doing. They do love to eat yellow jackets and the grubs and the tiny rodents like shrews and voles and stuff like that. So that's why they're digging in your yard. Not that they're wanting to damage your yard. They don't know that you want to be pristine, but they're trying to take advantage of these items. They're natural food items that's in the ground for them. If you want to deter them from building underneath your deck or your shed, you could put up an L-shaped fencing or wire to keep them from digging under, because a lot of people are like, "Oh, they're underneath my shed or they're underneath my deck and I don't want them to spray my dogs." But if you can build this to keep them from digging underneath there, then that will eliminate that. However, if they already under there, they don't usually spray unless they're spooked, they're feeling threatened. So 9 times out of 10, the skunks won't even spray, but you got to keep your dogs obviously from going after them, because if they do get sprayed, it's going to stink. And we do have a way to get that off. Do not automatically wash your dog or wash yourself. You want to use 3 ingredients. So if you take nothing else away tonight, use these 3 ingredients: Dawn dish detergent, baking soda, and hydrogen peroxide. Mix those all together, lather it up, wipe it all over yourself, put it in your hair, put it on your clothes, put it on your dog, and then rinse it off with water. Because if you use plain water or tomato juice or all these other items, it does not work. I promise you, I've tried it. I learned the hard way. But you can definitely use those items to get that odor off of yourself or your dog. Another reason that we get calls about skunks is that they've had skunks fall into their window wells. This is easily preventable. They make roofs to put on your window wells now, and it's usually clear plastic. You can get it at Lowe's, Home Depot. But if you put a window well roof over this, then that prevents anything from falling down into these window wells. And we get calls all the time about that. We've had turtles fall down in here. We've had frogs fall down in here. We've had skunks. We've had a whole array of animals that have gotten into the window wells and they can't get out. So usually people see there's a mom pacing around the window well and she's going back and forth trying to figure out a way for them to get out. If people are not willing to pick them up, because if you do it correctly, they will not spray you. So we recommend that you put in a board that they can climb up, or a branch or something. But if these animals have been in here for a little bit, they are usually dehydrated and they're going to need to come into care. But to pick up a skunk, a baby skunk, an adult skunk, is you use gloves, obviously, but you pick them up and tuck their tail, because if you tuck their tail, they're less likely to spray. But if they haven't been down in the window well for any length of time, you can set them loose. The mom will wander off with them and they'll scurry away. But If they are seeming lethargic, listless, lame, their eyes seem sunken in, they're dehydrated, then they'll need to come into care, because usually when they've fallen down, they haven't been able to nurse their mom, they haven't been getting the fluids that they needed, but they can be rehabbed and then released back into the wild. But usually if they're falling into a window well, we want to instruct people on how to prevent this, first of all, but how we can safely get them out, protect them, and protect yourself. And this is just one of my little skunk jokes. It was an accident. All right, foxes. We get lots of calls about foxes. And what we want people to take away and understand from this is that the foxes are not coming to kill your children or kill your pets. Will they take advantage of chicken coops and chickens not secure? Absolutely. So we recommend that people, if they have their chicken coops, again, going back to the raccoons and keeping them secure, is you can always build outside your chicken coop like a 12-foot concrete apron, right, to keep them from digging in, or put down wire underneath and bring it out about 12 inches, and that if the animal is digging, they can't really gain access because they can't get past the wire, they can't get past the concrete. But you also want to make sure that you have a roof on your chicken coop, because foxes will climb, raccoons will climb, your hawks will go down and pick up a chicken. We know that happens too. So there are ways that you can still have your chickens safely, and the animals, the wildlife can, live coexisting around them and not actually get to them. Again, we have people that contact us all the time about, I have foxes underneath my shed or my deck. Well, here's the number one reason why that's happening during the spring and summer, is that the foxes are thinking, I'm going to take a chance more with a human than I will with a coyote out in the woods. And that's the reason that they're usually moving in closer to the humans during pup season or kit season, is because they don't want to take that chance with the coyotes getting them. And the fact of the matter is that they're losing space and habitat to be able to have their babies, right? They're losing this refuge of the forested area and these dens that they can gain access to because of the clear cutting that's taking place. So they're having to adapt to what we've done to them by encroaching on their habitat. So just keep that in mind, that we can definitely coexist. And once they are old enough, they will disperse out. They won't hang around forever, but nothing's cuter than watching a lot of babies just play around and have a great time. I think it's a privilege to watch the wildlife. I wish more people would be more understanding of that. I feel like this group probably is, but the overall, general. Like I said, they're not going to eat your children or your pets. I mean, we have people with trail cameras sending us pictures with foxes and cats sitting beside each other, or foxes and whatever else, raccoons hanging out together. It's funny how the wildlife can coexist sometimes better than we can as humans. We need to take lessons from them. But also out during the day, this is another one of those species that you're likely to see them out during the day, especially during the summer, is that they're out foraging for those rodents they need, or the rabbits. So that mom and dad can supply enough nutrition for the babies to keep mom well fed, of course, to feed and nursing. And then the dad also helps take care of the babies as well. And then mange is another issue we get about, I get calls about with foxes, and that can definitely be treatable. So we will provide you information on who to contact regarding that matter, but mange is not a death sentence, and we can just get people to understand that and help them. But you will see them out during the day, especially in the winter if they have mange, because they're trying to absorb the heat from the sun during the day. They don't have the fur they need as much at night to keep them warm, so they try to get their heat during the day. And they're also trying to find food more during the day, during the winter, because they're not having to compete with other foxes or other wildlife. They don't have the energy that they need to be able to do that. So just keep that in mind. During the winter, you're more likely to see foxes out during the day that do have mange. Oh, so tell us what's driving you nuts. There's a couple things that's driving me nuts about today is clear cutting. And I'm sure that y'all are seeing a lot of that around you. I know that we have in the short amount of time that we've been, but this is happening on a regular basis. We are clear cutting and we're leaving very little habitat and thinking that this is enough space for these animals to live and thrive and coexist successfully. That is not the case. But for us, we're seeing what the clear cutting is happening, and more subdivisions or more skyscrapers are going up. Whatever the case may be, the animals are losing habitat and they're the ones suffering. Not only that, we're suffering as a whole because we are doing this deforestation. And it's changing a lot of things about habitat and air quality. Here's a list of reasons of why you know, when we deforest or clear cut, that we're changing not only the habitat for the animals, but the welfare for ourselves as well. Our air quality, our water quality gets altered. We're talking about hotter temperatures because we don't have the shade. You know, Charlotte, during the summer, the temperatures are so much higher because of all the concrete buildings around. And then you're losing the impervious ground. So you're going to have flash flooding when this rain takes place, the heavy downpours that y'all had this summer. You know, all that gets altered because we have clear cut the forest, and it definitely changes not only for the animals and for the forest life itself, but for everybody around, including us. And we need to be more mindful of that. So this is just a couple examples. And when I'm talking about the forest life, when I was out on a job site a couple years ago, we were working on the stream restoration. Not that this stream needed a whole lot of work, but you know, there were groundhogs, there were all kinds of wildlife. We got our possums that love to eat ticks. So we want to keep our possums around. We've got our squirrels that are planting new nuts and growing more trees for us. We've got our bats that live out there. We're affecting the whole food chain, you know, when we take out the forest. The microorganisms, all the animals that are being impacted. We don't realize it because you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. And just our reptiles in itself, you know, it takes 4 to 7 years for a turtle to gain maturity to be able to reproduce. And if you go out and clear cut and you clear or kill the existing turtles, they're not going to be able to repopulate because it does take so long for the reptiles to be you know, repopulating. So how can you be good wildlife stewards? That's what we all want to do and keep in mind and why we're here. There's multiple ways that you can do that, but for not killing or destroying is the number one thing that we can do as a whole, and definitely sharing that with others. Educating is going to be number one thing, and we're very we take pride in making sure that we're educating, we're rehabbing, and we're doing conservation work. And so that's ways that we want people to do that as well. Decreasing chemicals, pesticides, and herbicides are definitely having an impact on the wildlife more than people realize. Definitely with your box turtles, they're coming in with more ear abscesses, more upper respiratories because they consumed either plant life that was sprayed with something or an insect that was sprayed with something. So it definitely has an impact on other things than what you're just looking at. So using less chemicals, only planting your native species for your animals to browse on or for your pollinators to take advantage of. Those things that, you know, that's you helping and being a good wildlife steward. Cleaning up litter. Litter is one of my number one pet peeves. I absolutely despise litter. It may not be your litter. You may not have dumped it, but you're helping taking care of the area around, you know, the aesthetics, but you're also preventing that can from being on a raccoon's arm or plastic wrapped around a bird's neck or whatever the case may be. Helping keeping the community clean is a way of being a good wildlife steward. Checking your lawn or your trees before you cut or mow. You know, you're preventing from hitting a bunny's nest or from hitting a turtle or a snake. You know, if you've got an arborist coming out to do tree work, we understand that people have trees that need to be managed, you know, because it's dead and we don't want it to fall on your house for safety reasons. But a good arborist is going to check that tree before it goes cutting it down to make sure there's no raccoons in there or squirrels. We've definitely had calls where chainsaws have hit these babies or even their moms, and they need to come into care. But a good arborist will be mindful of that. And, you know, turn off your bug zappers. The bats need to eat the mosquitoes for you, right? They'll take full advantage of all those flying insects out there. And then, of course, if you find an injured, sick, or ill wildlife, that's you being a good wildlife steward, because you know you can call us and we're happy to help in any fashion when it comes to that. So when I talk about educating your kids, this is sadly a situation that we had this past summer where a mom actually watched her child dig up turtle eggs. And this is a spiny softshell hatchling. And she watched him open the egg and take out the turtle and rip off the yolk sac. So when they brought me this, I'm like, I'm not sure what you think I can do with this, because the turtles, all turtles, before they hatch, they absorb these yolk sacs, right? And that will allow them to get the nutrients they need before they leave. But she just thought it was funny and didn't think that the child was doing anything wrong, that he was just, you know, being curious or trying to explore a little bit. I understand that kids are going to explore, but it's us as adults and parents to be responsible in teaching that we keep animals and leave them alone, or even eggs or whatever you find, leave it where you find it unless it is harmed. So unfortunately, this turtle did not make it. Painting turtles, that's a no-no also. While people find that amusing, I have no idea, but that's actually going to cause more harm to the turtle because they're not able to absorb the nutrients or the vitamin D that they need from the sunlight. They're not going to be able to shed their scutes. There's a whole reason why you shouldn't paint turtle eggs. So educating the kids or anybody for that matter, even adults if they think that's something they should be doing, should not be. So just keep that in mind and share that with people around you that you see that may be possibly doing that. So if you do see any of the violations that we've talked about, the missed abusing of animals, or people evicting bats during the wrong time of year, this is the hotline number that you can call for the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission. They do want to hear from us. They are overwhelmed with so many calls every summer that I'm sure they're having a hard time keeping up with it. But you can also call us, of course, and we will try to give good guidance or advice on how we can handle the situation, or even if the animal needs to come into care. All right, so who does need help? Let's learn real quickly that who needs to come into care. So we try to tell people ahead of time, but if they don't know, that keeping wildlife as pets is illegal in North Carolina. We think we shouldn't have to tell people that, but we do, honestly. It's funny, we get calls all the time. Oh, I've had this raccoon for 4 months now, and now it's a little hellion. Can you take it? No, I mean, you should have thought about that beforehand. But just to know that the North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission does have a statute saying that it's illegal for you to keep wildlife for longer than 24 hours. Be responsible and get these animals into the proper rehab that they need. Who has the experience in doing this? And we get animals for all different types of situation. They've been orphaned for whatever reason. Mom was hit by a car, or the mom was relocated. Animals are cut out of trees or blown out of trees. Predator attacks, a known, deceased mom, or just human conflict. We get calls all the time in how we get our animals. So we will walk you through those situations and try to educate you on how we can possibly reunite, or if they actually do need to be rescued. But if you do come across an injured, sick, or orphaned wildlife, we want you to always take a picture, because pictures can tell us a lot of information. And then when you text that to us, we can provide you an information on how you should move forward with that. We ask that you always wear gloves, keep your health in mind, respect the wildlife. If you're going to bring them into care, you want to make sure they're in a ventilated container. A lot of times people forget that the containers do need to be ventilated. We've had animals transported to us in a tightly sealed, and unfortunately the animal's deceased because they didn't have the air that they needed, or they got overheated. During the summer, it gets really hot. But you want to make sure that you keep your pets and children away, and the noises, because these are all stressors, and stress can actually cause more problems for these animals. But be sure to call Rehabber immediately. Our number is out there. There's lots of rehabbers around. There's other organizations, but definitely give us a call, and we communicate a lot by text, and we can walk you through on whether or not that animal actually needs to be transported to a rehabber. The things we do not want you to do, and common sense goes a long ways, but I will emphasize a lot of this, is to always wear gloves, but to make sure that we're not trying to handle these. So what do we see wrong with this picture here? This is a text picture from someone, and this is a skunk, a baby skunk. And these people actually had torn down their shed or their deck. I think it was their shed. And there was a nest of baby skunk down there, and all of them were dead except for this one. So they automatically thought, oh, I'm going to start feeding this baby. Well, first of all, that's not good, because you can aspirate it, cause more harm than good. He's also actually handling it with bare hands, which we never recommend for anybody handling any type of animal. So all kinds of things are going wrong with this picture here. But we hear a lot of times, oh, we're just going to let nature take its course. And really, that's not the case. This is not nature taking its course by tearing down the shed, right? The mom just picked the wrong place. So to leave those babies to die is not fair. But we don't want people taking selfies. We have people all the time, oh, I'm gonna take a picture with me and this raccoon. We don't want people doing that either as well, because the animals do bite, they're scared. So we want to make sure that people are being mindful of these things. Never attempting to feed an animal. And we get that all the time, that people are actually trying to feed these animals. They're feeding them the wrong formula. They're feeding them the wrong temperature. They're aspirating them, so causing more harm than good. While they have great intentions, it's not doing good by the animal. So we don't want anybody feeding these animals. We try to reduce their exposure to air conditioning and draft. Well, I know it's hot, but a lot of times when people are transporting the animals to us, they have them on their floorboard. And guess what? Your air condition is blowing on the floorboard. And so it's automatically making them cold. So when we get these animals, they're cold, they're lethargic, and their situations have been made worse by that. If the animal is injured, especially turtles, people automatically want to wash off injuries. We recommend that you not do that. Leave that to the experienced rehabber. They know how to move forward with those wounds, but we don't want people trying to attempt that themselves. And we don't want people keeping them for any length of time. Again, going back to that law and regulation, it says 24 hours you get them to a rehabber. People want to keep them for a week or months. And we get people all the time, oh, I've had this squirrel for 2 months. Now it's going crazy. Yes, because hormones kick in, they become the natural wild animal that they're intending. And so people lose the novelty and then they're ready to get rid of them. So not keeping them for any length of time. Those are things that you do not want to do when you find wildlife. So determine whether or not an animal needs to be reunited or rescued, and that's going to be dictated by a couple of things. Is this a humane removal? Does it actually need a rehabber? And of course, taking pictures. Again, knowing that the mom is deceased, we know that this baby possum needs to come into care. So there are certain animals that can be reunited with their moms. Those are the cottontails, the squirrels, the raccoons, foxes, and the fawns. Those, when they are found, usually can be reunited if we know they're not injured or they're not sick. We get calls all the time, and fawn nappers are the worst. Oh, I found this fawn and it's by itself. And that's intentional by mom. She does that. But if we're going to attempt to reunite the babies with their moms, knowing that they're not injured or sick, then we will give them up to 24 hours. Once we start pushing that past that, when we're going to start increasing the chances of dehydration, they're going to become lethargic. So we want a short time frame to be able to do that successfully. And determining whether or not the animal is actually orphaned, it will depend on the species. There are some, if you find, and we know we cannot reunite, and we'll go a little bit more into that. Determining the body condition of the animal, your skin tuger test, we'll talk about that. Fly strike, I know you hear that a lot. Fly eggs, and whether or not there's any wounds or blood. We know that those animals cannot be reunited. The skin tuger test, the same thing applies to you. If you're dehydrated, if you pull up your skin and it stays up for longer than 3 seconds, then you're dehydrated and you need to drink some fluids. The same thing applies to the wildlife as well. So we'll have you do these tests if you find these babies and say, yes, they definitely need to come into care. They've gone too long without the hydration and nutrition that they need. Bunnies, we get bunny calls all the time. I found bunnies in my yard while I was mowing my grass, or I disturbed the nest, or my dog found. And we will talk about ways that you can test whether or not mom is still coming back and feeding those babies. Putting flour around the nest. If the flour has got footprints in it or it's all disturbed, we know mom's been feeding those babies. The tic-tac-toe design is one of the number one things that we tell people to use. If mom comes back, this design is going to be disturbed. It's not going to be nice and neat like you laid it. That could be lightweight twigs. It could be flower stems, whatever you'd like to use. Something that's not going to deter mom from feeding those babies, something natural that is going to allow her to still get in there and feed. Some people have been creative and they use different things to deter the dogs or the cats from getting to them. These people use a little garden fence to put around. Some people have put a whole picnic table over so the dog can't get to them. Laundry baskets, different things have been used for people to keep their dogs or their pets out from disturbing. But these are the different life stages where we like to tell people, okay, this baby definitely needs to come into care because it's a neonate, it's naked, his ears are flat, hair is still smooth. The kids or the bunnies' eyes and ears are up, but they still have the smooth fur. And this here, their ears are up and their fur is looking better, but it's not fluffy, it's still slick. And then you've got your bunny, while it may be little, it's on its own. So they're out in 4 weeks because mom's already made more bunnies, right? So they're going to be in and out quickly. And that's the great thing about rehabbing bunnies, that they're in and out fast. But we provide these life stages to be able to compare to your picture that you're going to send us and let us know whether or not that animal actually needs to come into care. Now here's a couple more examples of whether or not these animals can be reunited or not. So we've got these babies here that were found in a grill and they look very healthy. They don't look like they've been without mom for any length of time. So we set them out on the grill and let mom come back and get them. That's a great opportunity to reunite. This baby here, while he looks great, he's following you around. So what does that tell you? He's orphaned, he's hungry, and he thinks that he can get something from you or even your cat and your dog. And usually that's when they get a cat attack or a dog attack. But if this baby's following you around, then we know it needs to come into care. And then lastly, of course, if it's injured in any way, then we want to bring it into care. It's not a reunite that we can attempt. This is an example of here, moms, while they may be great moms while they have their babies, but if one falls off, this poor mom does not know because she carries so many that if one falls off, she's not going to know that she lost that baby. So if you find a single possum by itself, it needs to come into care. You can't try to reunite. Or we know that mom is dead, the entire litter needs to come in. A lot of people are very nice and they check the pouches of deceased possums on the road, and they find a pouch full of babies, they'll call us and they'll bring them to us. But this is another example of the fawn. The fawns are left by themselves, and the mom intentionally does that. She'll tap them on the head to make them lay down, and that way she can go about foraging because the babies cannot keep up with her. And so she's also trying to prevent predators from following her as well to get to the babies. So to find a fawn by itself is not unusual or uncommon. Now, what does mean it needs to come into care is whether or not there's flies around it, there's maggot eggs or fly strike, if the baby is crying loudly, drawing attention to itself, or it's lethargic, then that's when you would intervene. But just to find one that looks healthy, sleeping, that's not being orphaned. So evicting and reuniting with moms, like we talked about earlier, squirrels and raccoons are going to be in your attic, but we can evict these babies humanely and allow mom to take them away. There are multiple ways to do that, as we've discussed earlier, but we do need to give her time to get them out. And like I said, we don't want to go for any length of time, but we definitely want to give her the time that she needs, 24 hours, to get them out. If you call a wildlife removal company, they may say that they're using a humane trap to get them out, and they may be, but they are going to kill them. They won't tell you that part. So just keep that in mind, that there are ways that you can evict them humanely yourself, keep your costs down, and protect the animals at the same time. So just keep that in mind. If you find any of these single babies, they need to come into care because they should not be by themselves or out of their den, or if they've been, attacked by a cat or a dog. This is a baby groundhog. He should have never been out of the den at this age. So the fact that he was out stone cold, we knew he needed to come into care. A single bobcat or single possum. And I'll talk more about these other individuals as we come across those. But if you find a single baby of any of these species, they usually need to come into care. For skunks, they're very deceiving. A lot of people think, oh, they look healthy because they're fluffy, but their fur can be very deceiving. They can be easily dehydrated very quickly. If they are not with mom, either in a group huddled around her or in a single file, then they need to come into care. Let it be a single or let it be a litter. Mom must be with them at all times. If they are not, then something is wrong and they need to come into care. A lot of people say, oh, they look great, but they come in and they're lethargic and they're very hypothermic, cold, can't regulate their body temperature. And we've had a lot of skunks die just because they thought that mom would still come back and get them and she was already deceased. Finding single babies of otters and beavers or muskrats, they will always need to come into care as well because you don't know where the den is. Usually they've been flooded out with big storm events, and you don't know where the den is, so they can't be reunited. If it's an adult and injured, obviously it needs to come into care. The same applies for your minks and your weasels. If you find individual babies, they need to come into care as well, so you can call us. Bats. So with the bats, I talked about the season earlier where you can evict them and when you cannot evict them. Keep those dates in mind, May 1st through August 31st. But some of those species cannot be reunited with mom. If it's a tree bat, more than likely you cannot reunite them because they are solitary individuals. They're not colony individuals. Whereas a colony such as a big brown bat, you usually know where there's a colony up in your attic or your bat box. If they're falling right below that, then normally you can try to reunite if they look healthy. Again, we're going to ask for a picture because that's going to dictate and tell us a lot. But we definitely only want to try reuniting at night. These are all incidents where you would not reunite anybody. They would all need to come into care. Predominantly adults. She was burned in a brush fire. This kid was hit by some sort of like weed eater or something. This is a cat attack. This is a baby. While it may look good, it's a little dehydrated, but it also has bat bugs, which is a parasite for them. So anytime there's a parasite overload, we want them to come into care. This kid was on a glue trap, and this mom here was sprayed with pesticide spray. They thought she was a spider, so they loaded her down with pesticide spray to kill her. And then they put her in a plastic container and sealed it to bring her to me. And then she was pregnant. So not only did she die, but the babies died as well. So these are all incidents where they need to come into care, but sometimes they cannot be saved, but at least they're not out there suffering or letting nature take its course. All right, so we're going to talk real quickly about our turtles and tortoises. While the summer's gone, the warm rains will definitely bring out your turtles during the summer, and you'll see them on the road. Keep that in mind. In the summer, heavy rains equals turtles on the road. They get hit by cars. But they're moving to warm up because they like to lay on that concrete to warm up. Or they're traveling to go dig their nest. Aquatic turtles, all aquatic turtles will leave their water source, pond, stream, creek, whatever, to go lay their eggs. They do not lay eggs in the water. So these aquatic turtles, your snapping turtles, your yellow belly sliders, your painted turtles, can all travel up to a mile to go lay their eggs, which is crazy to me. That's a lot of work, right? When you just crawl up on the bank, lay some eggs, and go right back in. But nonetheless, that's what they do. And then habitat destruction is always making the turtles come out. Right now, during the winter, we get turtle calls for people that are doing construction work, and they've unearthed the turtles that are hibernating. So if that happens, they need to come into care. But how to move a snapping turtle off the road if it hasn't already been hit. There are multiple videos on YouTube on how to safely remove a snapping turtle from the road. And as you can see here, grab them in the back of the carapace so their necks don't reach around and grab you, but you don't want to grab them on the sides because their necks can definitely go to the sides and grab your hands. Their heads can actually go underneath them as well. So you want to make sure that you're handling them safely. Other options that you can take away from this, if you got a car mat, put them on the car mat and drag the car mat over to the side of the road. Just get them off in the direction that they're heading. That's where the any turtles actually. And keep in mind that turtles do climb. People seem to think that they don't, but they really do. And this snapping turtle was climbing this lady's fence, getting into her garden to go lay some eggs. So when people call us and say, oh, I've got this turtle that's laying eggs, I want to protect them. This is a fun story that I like to share with people. This is a spiny soft shell that came into our care this year, and she had a fishing hook in her mouth, and we got it out. Actually, it was in her neck. We had to do surgery on her, but we also knew that she was gravid. So she wasn't wanting to cooperate and care and eat like she should. So once she was ready to go, we got her back out. We released her. I released her at a friend's house, and they called me, and they thought that this turtle was like saluting the flag and all, right? But she was actually digging a nest for her eggs. So when he walked over there, he spooked her, and she ran off back into the river. And he's like, oh my gosh, I've got these eggs. They're not covered up. So I explained to him, just take the dirt and the sand that she dug up and just put it back in there. Don't pack it down tightly, but put it down in there. And then to protect the eggs from the predators like your raccoons or your skunks or foxes, because they love to dig up turtle eggs, he put a protection around this to protect the eggs from being dug up by predators. He even went another step and put a motion camera on top. So when the ground got disturbed, he knew that. And sure enough, he called me. He's like, we've got all these spiny soft shell hatchlings. And there were 15 that he was able to get back out into the river, which was a great success story. So if you do see a turtle laying eggs, you know, that's a way that you can protect them and keep them safe from predators digging them up or from mowing over them or whatever. Just be mindful of that. If you come across turtles that are not local, these are resources that you can contact if you're at the beach or if you're in the mountains or somewhere in between North Carolina and the state that can help you with turtles. If you're local here and it's after hours or whatever, we can definitely help with euthanasia, but there are some locations that can euthanize turtles for free. Sending us a picture, we can say, yes, it definitely needs to be euthanized. If it's after hours for us, but there's a hospital or someone available, we can give you that information as well. But a rehabber is a must if we see this. What is this? What do we think this is? Fly strike, exactly. And that's what this is. This was a turtle that had been picked up by construction equipment, and he had fly strike on him. So anytime we have these incidences where we have any type of predator attack, they've been hit with chainsaw, lawn equipment, that kind of stuff, hit by car, fallen trees, and from storms and stuff, and they've been injured, or a foreign object. All those animals will need to come into care. That's an example of a snake that swallowed fake eggs. And then again, like I said earlier, the foxes with mange can definitely be treated. We can provide you information on who to contact for that. Squirrel pox is sometimes treatable, not always, but if you see a squirrel in need of help, we can definitely help with that. Canine distemper, I'll talk a minute about that, but that's the number one thing that's killing the raccoons in North Carolina, especially Mecklenburg County and Gaston County. Not rabies. A lot of people think rabies is taking out the raccoons, and it's not. It's canine distemper. And we've seen that in just vast quantity wiping out the raccoons, and it's very sad. And of course, animals with warbles, usually that's your gray squirrels that have those, but any of those can come into care. We're happy to help with any of that. Restricted rehab. We do not have a license for a fawn, so we will not be able to help, but we can provide you with resources. But I will say this, the North Carolina fawn rehab community is becoming smaller and smaller, and mainly that is because of the chronic wasting disease. I'm sure if your husband or whomever is a hunter, they're familiar with that, but it is spreading across North Carolina. So they're restricting on certain counties from being able to rehab fawns. It's sad. I hate to hear that, but that is happening. And then of course the deer, the adult deer, North Carolina does not allow us to rehab them because of capture myopathy. Other states do allow it sometimes, but unfortunately in North Carolina we cannot. So we just provide you with the information on who to contact to take care of that individual. Be a responsible hunter. This picture drives me insane, but this is a lady that has contacted, or she did contact us several times about this little fawn that was shot, and the arrow missed where it should have hit. And so this poor thing's walking around in the woods. You know, this arrow is hitting brush and trees and everything, and I'm sure it suffered, but it's not an easy animal that we could capture, so it was suffering. But I will just say, if you're going to be a hunter, be a responsible hunter. Take the kill shot or don't shoot at all if you're not good at it. This is the map that we will provide you. This one's probably outdated a little bit because there are some counties in here that do not allow rehabbing, but we can provide you with that information as well. Black bear, we do not have a license for bear, but we can definitely put you in contact with those that do rehab bear. And I would just say coexisting with bear is simple as keeping your trash cans up, you know, making sure the lids are on, being mindful, you know, that if you do have an apple tree, they're going to take full advantage of that. There's a particular tree in Belmont, North Carolina, that they call us all the time. There's bears out here eating apples again. And that's not uncommon, but they're going to take advantage of that free food, right? Coyotes is another one that we cannot rehab in North Carolina. It's a state law. We can euthanize, but we cannot rehab for release. So that's the situation here. This adult girl was hit by a car. She had a broken back, so I went and picked her up, and she was euthanized. But we cannot rehab pups to be released back into the wild. So you know, that's another sad situation, but that's the one RVS that the state wouldn't allow us. So if you call us about a coyote pup, we won't be able to rehab that for you. And then if we're going to have you transport these animals, we're going to talk about safe containment, you know, how to respect the animal and get them into a container that's appropriate for their size, and using common sense, your gloves and your towels to keep you safe and to keep them safe. And then a little bit about us. The Carolina Wildlife Conservation Center, we've been around for 5 years now. We're a nonprofit organization, as you know, and so we function completely from donations. We don't get any type of government or state funding, but we have been very successful, and we are doing well enough that we are going to do a capital campaign fundraiser for the love of wildlife. That's going to be in February, so watch our social media because we're actually needing to expand. We've grown so much that we are needing more space. So that's our goal. This is our barn that was renovated to house for our patients. We have our tack room that's now become the ER, so we can actually do surgery in there. But we're definitely growing, but our capital campaign fundraiser is going to be in February, so please watch us for that. But we want the public to know that we're not only just about rehabilitation, but about education, because if you educate the public, educate the kids, then we're going to keep that going and more animals can be helped in that way. And then conservation efforts. Let that be in saving an individual animal who can go out and have more babies. This is an example. This hatchling right here was born from turtles that we rehabbed in our outdoor habitat. And then the red bats, you know, we want to make sure that we're saving as many bats as we possibly can, but all wildlife in general. So our goal is always to rescue, rehab, and release back into the wild. And if they can't be released back into the wild, then at least we can end their suffering. They're not out there, you know, struggling. But we get most of our animals from the public. The public finds them, they bring them to us. We also get animals from veterinary hospitals that call us, animal control, Mecklenburg County, Gaston County, and wildlife officers. So we get animals from everybody across the state, and we actually get them from from Fayetteville to Asheville. So it's amazing that people are willing to bring wildlife such a distance to get help. And then these are some resources that you can use. Gates Wildlife is a wildlife removal company in Canada. I think he does great work. He's probably the only one that I would ever recommend for anyone to follow, but he gives great examples on how to humanely evict animals as well. But he's a great resource to have. The Humane Society has a whole guidebook on how to coexist and deal with wildlife. We will provide you with any information that we have readily available to us. If you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, we can provide you a list if you're not close to us of rehabbers. And AH Now is another website that you can use. So I know I went through that very fast, but I wanted to make sure I got to everyone's questions, and I want to make sure that I got through it all. So that's what I had for you guys. Some of that you may have already heard. All right, so do we have questions? Okay.
Just moved into our house last year. Last year we had a few skunks under our shed. We coexisted with them just fine. They have now moved on, and they are now feral pigeons getting under the shed. Does that mean the skunks won't come back? Or another question is, do skunks come back to the same place each year?
Sometimes skunks will come back if they know it's a safe place, but if there are feral cats living there, they probably won't come back.
And then to follow up, what to do with feral cat colonies in our neighborhood?
There's a TNR program that they can contact, but we don't do any type of domestic pets, cats or dogs or anything like that. Well, that was easy. Any other questions? I know I flew through that. I talk really fast once I get going, but I want to make sure you got as much information as possible. Correct. Usually we do not have people bring deer to us. That's one that you can't, but animal control will go out and euthanize, or North Carolina Wildlife Resource Commission can go out and euthanize. Yeah, but normally people don't bring us deer to euthanize. Yes, ma'am. Well, in that situation, I don't know. I mean, if we don't know where the pups are at, we can't help them. So they're orphaned. Usually animal control. Oh, the question was, what if you find coyote pups with an injured mom that has to be euthanized? Then usually animal control is contacted for those. I know it's sad, but the state won't allow us to rehab them. They're considered more of a nuisance in North Carolina and an invasive species. And not that I want to get on my soapbox, but I will a little bit. So my thing is that we're compressing all these animals into a single area, and then we're not offering help to them. I don't think that's right, but we're compressing these animals into an area, and they're trying to coexist, and it doesn't always work with humans or with each other. Speaking of feral colonies, is that a lot of the raccoons are getting sick because of diseases they're picking up from domestic pets or animals not vaccinated. Your feral colonies are spreading feline panleukopenia and feline distemper. There's feline distemper and there's canine distemper. It's a different variant of distemper, but nonetheless, these animals are taking advantage of the food that's being put out at these colonies, but they're all congregating and sharing the food bowls and fighting and all that. So they're spreading diseases, right? So it irritates me that people are like, oh, we can't help them, but we want you to euthanize, or, we are going to push them all into this area and spread all these diseases, but we're not being responsible in other ways as well. So that's just my little soapbox. But I agree. I hate that the coyotes can't be helped, but that's just the state law. I worked on the committee with the state that decided they were going to change the rules and regulations for us to do RVS. It wasn't until 2020 they allowed us to rehab raccoons, foxes, skunks, and bats. They said we could either do those, but if we wanted to do coyotes, they wouldn't pass the law at all. So we had to sacrifice, unfortunately, to be able to rehab these other animals. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't want to give bad news. Yes, ma'am.
So you get say you get a fox and that could possibly be a rabies vector. How do you handle that when you get a patient in that's possible rabies here?
So we go through a quarantine protocol, and we have that set up for all of our rabies vector species. But they go through a quarantine protocol. If it's an individual, they're kept separate. We even try to put them in separate rooms, but again, we're running out of space to be able to do that. And we had that situation this year with baby raccoons. But we know that distemper can spread easily. Airborne is one way. So, but we do keep them separate. They go through a quarantine. If we have any suspicions, I usually like to do 2 weeks minimum, 3 weeks for quarantine time. That's my golden rule, 3 weeks. 2 weeks is is more lenient. But we do those species last. So we do all of our other animals that we know are healthy and that kind of stuff, and we do those species last. Now, I will say that a service that we provide, and not all rehabbers do, is that we vaccinate these animals before they're released. We vaccinate them against distemper, and we vaccinate them against rabies. So, we're preparing them to go out into the wild with a better shield of protection, if you would say, to help them. But while in care with us, they get those vaccines, which also protects us. And then more importantly, we're vaccinated. So any of our rehabbers that are working with these species, they must be rabies vaccinated. And that's a state law as well. So in order for us to rehab these animals, that's the one thing that we had to do is become vaccinated against rabies. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Couple more questions.
Okay.
Do you have any recommendations of what gloves to include in a rescue kit?
Yes. So your thick leather welding gloves are always great. They even make Kevlar gloves now these days too. I have a couple of volunteers that have those in their rehab kit or rescue kit. But yes, not gardening gloves. Gardening gloves are very thin. They're pointless. Not your driving gloves. Those aren't thick enough. Something that's thick that's going to protect you, because these animals will bite, and sadly, if they bite, then we have to euthanize and be tested, and 9 times out of 10, they come back negative. So that animal's had to die for no reason. But yes, thick welding gloves.
So put together a rescue kit for our carry
In your car?
What should that
So I had a video up here, right? Oop, here we go. I lied. Am I going the wrong way? There we go. Oop. So a size appropriate container. If you've got a bat, you don't need to put it in this big old Rubbermaid bin, right? But if it's a raccoon, yes, some sort of pet carrier. If it's ventilated, of course. This is more for bats or squirrels or bunnies. So size appropriate container. And some of these you can put inside the other. You want to make sure you've got thick towels to place over the animal, because usually if you place it over the animal, out of sight, out of mind, it keeps their stress level down, and so they're less likely to bite. And then these are some examples of the thick gloves I was talking about. Brand, no, just welding gloves. We're not picky about brand. Whatever just keeps us safe. The thicker, the better. But just keep in mind, and sometimes it's hard to handle animals with thick gloves on too. So keeping that towel over them, placing that over them, and then your thick gloves and picking them up and putting them in a container. That usually, now you don't need that with bunnies, obviously, right? But with your RVS animals, you would. Is that it?
What are some common misconceptions that rehabbers face that the public might not realize?
Oh, that's a great one. First of all, everybody thinks that we're just Snow White and everything's lovey-dovey and everything loves us. They don't. They hate us. They want to eat us, right? That's not necessarily true, but these animals do bite. They're hurt. They're scared. We are a threat to them, and that's how they perceive us. So we're not sitting there and just like, oh, I just want to hug you all the time. We have to respect the animal first and foremost. We have to be mindful of how we're handling them. But that's the number one thing, is a lot of people think that we're just Snow White and everything's lovey-dovey. We see a lot of heartache. If people realize how much heartache we see, they, would have a better appreciation, I think, for what we actually do, because we do see a lot of heartache. It's sad.
The last question. Do you mark the released animals that have been vaccinated?
No, we do not mark them. No, we're not tagging anybody or anything like that. Maybe in the future for a project for us, but that requires funding. So no. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Capture myopathy. So, and all animals can experience this, but it's usually your deer, your fawn. If people people are chasing the animals down, it builds up lactic acid in their muscles and they're not able to get the oxygen that they need, and it starts shutting down their heart. So that stress will actually cause them to die from it. It may not happen immediately, it could be several days later, but it is a #1 thing that will kill deer and fawn, but it happens to bunnies too. I mean, if you got to chase it down, you usually don't have to catch it. I mean, it doesn't need rehab. Your question? Oh no.
Just as far as misconceptions.
Okay. That's going way back. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Very, very true. Yes. Yes. Very good point. So we do not have a wildlife ambulance. I wish we did, but we don't. Again, that requires funding. But yes, rehabbing is very expensive. Let that be in your home or at a center. It requires a lot of funds. And so no one in North Carolina, as a home-based rehabber or in a facility, is state or federally funded. For whatever reason, they don't think we're necessary. And so we're not paid. We volunteer. And it takes every bit of the donations that we get to be able to function and do such a good job and provide these vaccines or the medical care and the surgeries for the animals. But it is also a lifestyle. I've been doing this, like I said, over 15 years, and it's something that thankfully my husband has, put up with me and my love for the animals, but it takes a lot. And that's another misconception, is it's not easy. It's around the clock care. It's around the clock. It's a lifestyle. So everybody thinks that it's just fun and easy. And while it can be, and it's very rewarding, a lot of times it is very labor intensive. We do a lot of professional poop cleaning, but there's a lot of that involved, and it's just more demanding than people, I think, realize. But it's necessary. Obviously, we're averaging about 2,000 animals a year. And sadly, since we've been at the center, it's increased every year. So it's just going to show that the wildlife is needing us because of us and what we're doing. Any other questions? Yes. Morgan, how many total do we have? Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. I would have guessed wrong. I think I was going to say like 20 and 25. But yeah, it takes a whole village to do what we do, especially at a center. And, while not all volunteers are going to be bottle feeding, we have volunteers that love to clean, housekeeping. And we emphasize on keeping a good, tidy place so that the animals are better cared for. And then we have some transporters that are willing to go out for us. And the hotline team is amazing. Like, Morgan and I tried doing the hotline and rehab and all this by ourselves for the first couple of years, and we about lost our minds. Yeah. So we realized real quickly that we needed a full-on team, and we've been successful because of it. So we couldn't do it without the people that we have on board with us. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh yeah, we have people check possums all the time. Yeah. Have this little kit in your car, some plastic gloves or whatever. If you're not comfortable hand on bare hand, having some small containers. But yes, if people see a deceased possum, especially during the summer, they usually know to check pouches, and to pull the babies out. Some people are not comfortable with that. Excuse me, they'll bring the whole mom and all, and that's fine too. We can deal with it, but most people will just check the pouches, pull the babies out, and bring them into care. Still move the mom off the road so the vulture doesn't get hit, because the vulture is going to take care of her. So yeah, and that's what happens a lot of time. These other animals get hit because they're eating the deceased. But yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We've had them come in. People have done a U-turn and come back, and sure enough, it was hit by a car, or it was whatever the case may be, and they bring them into care. And some we help, some we can't, but at least they're not out there suffering. Yeah. But that's where we recommend the thick gloves, the towel, the secure container. Now, listen, don't go throwing that thing in a cardboard box because that cardboard box is not secure. And if it was just stunned and then it becomes, alarm and it jumps out, then your safety's at risk there. So common sense goes a long ways.
The chat asked about, do you guys rescue birds?
No.
Carolina waterfowl rescue? Are there any other resources for birds?
Carolina waterfowl, Carolina Wildlife Sanctuary in Concord. There's a lot of Carolina wildlife these days. And then Carolina Wildlife Rehab Center. And does ARC have anybody with birds? Do you know? I don't think they do. They haven't for a long time. So those are the three that I know that do birds. Carolina Wildlife Rehab Center. I know, it's very confusing. Yes, of course, the Carolina Raptor Center for your birds of prey, but not songbirds. Yeah. Lots of Carolina. Yes.
How does art play into it all? Not touching on that, like.
ARC is another wildlife rehab organization, and they are all home-based volunteers, but all volunteers. And, when people reach us and they're like, oh, you're too far for us to drive to, we'll provide you with the North Carolina map of rehabbers, and it has everybody's name on there and the organization they're affiliated with. Any other questions? Okay.
Are there places that rehab amphibians?
Yes, we do. We love our toads and our salamanders and all that kind of good stuff. Okay, is that it? Yes, ma'am. Wow. I hate to say it, but monetary funds, money is the number one thing because the formulas that we feed these babies is like $125 a bag, right? And we feed a lot of possums and a lot of squirrels, and they take a lot of formula. The raccoons, their formula bags are expensive. The foxes, everybody's formula has gone up. Inflation has impacted us. We feed a lot of good produce, so we are always buying fresh produce for our animals. We provide high quality foods. Our medications are expensive. We have a veterinarian that we're paying for doing surgery. So funds is the number one thing. And then if they want to volunteer in some fashion, we have in-house, we have transport, we have hotline, and we have an application on our website that people can fill out if they want to do something like that. Morgan, you got any other input with that? Amazon wish list is available on our website as well. Yeah. Yeah, because we're constantly, having to change out toys or we're trying to, provide water bowls. I mean, our wish list contains a lot of stuff. Yeah, for habitats and rehabbing and all that. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah. No, unfortunately, we don't have that. I mean, sometimes in the summer, people have extra in their personal gardens and they'll bring us, but we don't have like a store that actually provides us. I wish, because we spend a lot of money at the grocery store on produce. Yeah. Yeah, there for a while, there used to be years ago, but they've gotten out of that for whatever reason. And it really just is unfortunate because it's a lot of good food that could help a lot of people. Yeah. But no, we don't have anything. We actually have to buy all of our food. Any other questions? Is that it, Alden? All right. Well, thank you guys for having us. Yeah, you're welcome.